We are counting down the 10 most terrifying dangers faced by American tunnel rats beneath Vietnam. From pitch-black traps and silent venom to the suffocating knowledge that few ever made it back. These encounters pushed soldiers to the edge of survival and sanity. Which underground threat was the most feared of all? Let us begin the countdown with number 10. Demolition runs meant crawling deep into enemy tunnels with blocks of C4 and a fuse timer set for 5 to 15 minutes. Each charge had to be placed at the farthest point, often past tight bends and through pockets of stale, suffocating air. Once the fuse was burning, every second counted. Smoke and dust thickened the air, making each breath harder. The only way out was the same twisting path, now filling with haze and echoing with the ticking countdown. Pressure from the blast could throw a man deeper into the tunnel or trigger collapses behind him. Sometimes, when the main exits sealed shut, bodies were only recovered weeks later during excavation. For tunnel rats, the line between escape and entombment was measured in minutes. Monsoon rains turned sections of the tunnels into hidden rivers. Water filled entire stretches, forcing soldiers to crawl forward with only their mouths and noses above the surface. Flashlights flickered out, useless in the murk. The world shrank to the sound of a heartbeat and the cold press of mud. Some passages dipped beneath the waterline, demanding a held breath and a blind push forward, never knowing if there was air on the other side. Strong underground currents tugged at boots and gear, twisting direction until up felt like down. Operation logs recorded men lost in these flooded shafts, their bodies found weeks later when the water finally receded. A single wire stretched across a tunnel door could mean instant death. Grenades were rigged to hatches, tripwires, and even hinges, set to detonate the moment a soldier nudged them open. In the tight darkness, there was no room to dive away, just a sudden blast that filled the passage with fire, metal, and shock waves. Tunnel walls acted like a barrel, funneling every fragment and pressure wave straight into the body. Survivors often lost limbs or eyes, their eardrums shattered by the overpressure. Some never heard again. Medical teams recorded ruptured lungs and organs from the confined blast, injuries far worse than open-air explosions. For many tunnel rats, the threat of a grenade-wired door was the most unforgiving trap, unseen, silent, and almost always fatal. 3 feet wide, pitch black, and barely high enough to crawl, the tunnels forced men into combat at arm's length. Tunnel rats sometimes rounded a corner and found themselves face to face with a Viet Cong fighter, both startled, both desperate. Pistols fired at contact range, the muzzle flash blinding in total darkness, the shockwave bouncing between walls. Sometimes there was not even space to aim. Fights collapsed into grappling, hands searching for a throat, a weapon, anything to gain the upper hand. Knives flashed in the dark, the struggle decided by touch and instinct. The body of a fallen enemy or comrade could block the passage, trapping the survivor in place. Veterans described the silence after such encounters as worse than the violence, every breath reminding them how close death had come. In these moments, the enemy was not a distant figure, but a presence felt in the dark, inches away. A single misstep could drop a soldier through a camouflaged floor into a pit lined with sharpened bamboo stakes. These punji stakes, often hidden at bends where movement was fastest, targeted the legs, groin, or abdomen. The stakes were not just sharp, they were fouled with human waste, turning every puncture into a breeding ground for infection. Pulling free was often impossible without tearing flesh, and even if a wounded man could be dragged out, the risk of sepsis was high. Medical notes from the field describe wounds that swelled and blackened within days, sometimes leading to amputations or death despite evacuation. Extraction teams faced the added danger of collapse, as the effort to save a trapped comrade could bring the tunnel down around them. In the darkness, the slow agony of a punji stake wound was a sentence as much as an injury. Bamboo vipers and cobras were sometimes tied by the Viet Cong at head height in the tunnels, ready to strike at the first sign of movement. A glint of scale in the flashlight beam could mean the difference between a safe crawl and a bite that spelled disaster. Bamboo viper venom destroyed flesh and blood vessels, causing tissue to rot, even as a soldier tried to crawl out. Cobra venom worked differently, paralyzing muscles, shutting down breathing, sometimes within minutes. There was no antivenin underground. Some men managed to drag themselves back to daylight as the numbness crept up their limbs. Others didn't make it. Scorpion boxes, rigged to spill their contents when a wire was tripped, unleashed a silent swarm in the darkness. Medical records from the conflict list multiple deaths from venom underground, but most stories end in silence. A soldier gone missing, found later. A bite mark, the only clue to what happened in the pitch-black maze. Some tunnel passages narrowed to just 2 feet high and 2 feet wide, forcing soldiers to squeeze forward on their stomachs with barely enough room to move. In these dead-end corkscrews, a man could become wedged so tightly that even shallow breaths felt impossible. The air grew stale, thick with rising carbon dioxide, and panic set in as every inhale brought less relief. Crawling backward was out of the question. There was no space to turn, no way to retreat. Rescue attempts from above risked disaster. Pulling too hard could trigger a collapse and bury both rescuer and trapped man beneath tons of earth. In some cases, teams tried to cut stuck soldiers free, sawing through boots and webbing. But the clock was always running against them. Field reports tell of men who suffocated before help arrived, their bodies blocking the passage until the tunnel could be dug out by hand. The unwritten rule was clear. Never leave a comrade behind, no matter the risk. A single shot from the standard .45 caliber M1911 pistol turned the tunnel into a sensory trap. The muzzle flash exploded in total darkness, wiping out night vision in an instant. The sound, trapped by earthen walls, bounced back with a force that stunned and deafened. Veterans described the pressure wave as a hammer to the chest and eardrums, sometimes enough to rupture them on the spot. After firing, the world narrowed to a ringing void. Every movement became guesswork, every shadow a possible threat. Reloading was done by touch, counting rounds to avoid being caught empty in a blind shootout. Medical records from the war list cases of permanent hearing loss, ruptured eardrums, and disorientation that lingered long after the firefight ended. In those moments, the pistol became both a shield and a hazard, offering survival at the cost of the senses needed to find the way out, or even hear the next ambush waiting in the dark. The Cu Chi district hid an underground world that stretched for more than 100 miles, with some estimates reaching up to 250 kilometers of twisting, interlocked tunnels. These weren't simple burrows. They stacked 3 levels deep in certain sectors, dropping from just below the surface to nearly 12 meters down. Each layer connected by narrow shafts, hidden trapdoors, and blind corners, forming a true 3-dimensional maze. There were no reliable maps. Tunnel rats moved by memory, counting turns and marking walls with chalk or string, knowing a single mistake could send them in circles or straight into an ambush. False walls and dead-end decoys absorbed hours, draining precious flashlight batteries. A missed turn might lead to a shaft dropping into darkness or to a passage that simply ended, trapping the unwary. Some tunnels held the remains of men who vanished years before, lost in the labyrinth and found only when new routes were uncovered. In this sprawling, unmapped network, Every hazard, from traps to enemy fighters to bad air, became more lethal, magnified by the sheer scale and the confusion of the underground city. Every tunnel rat crawled forward under the weight of a silent calculation. In some units, 1 out of every 3 men sent underground never came back whole. The names of the missing hung in the air at every briefing. Men as young as 19 wrote final letters before each mission, knowing that the same route had already claimed friends days or weeks before. The odds were no secret. Casualty summaries circulated quietly, and the faces at memorial services changed with each operation. There was no special badge for tunnel warfare, no official recognition for those who volunteered again and again. The only constant was the rule: no one left behind. Even when a tunnel collapsed or a trap snapped shut, teams risked everything to recover a body, refusing to let a comrade vanish in the dark. The psychological toll settled in long before the first shot or the first booby trap. Every sound, every squeeze of earth, every breath in the blackness pressed with the memory of those lost. For many, the mission was as much about honoring the fallen as it was about survival. The knowledge that most tunnel rats before them had died or been maimed turned every hazard into a personal reckoning, and every crawl into a test of courage that would echo for decades after the war ended. Across all these encounters, one pattern stands out. Underground fear is magnified by the certainty of loss. The greatest threat wasn't just physical, it was psychological. Tunnel warfare proves that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to face it when survival odds are brutally clear.